Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. Today I want to give an update on our pigs. So I've had several questions about how things are going with the pigs as far as breeding goes, the trough, the layout, all that type of stuff, how it's been this winter. And so let's jump right in and talk about it. So right now I think I'm actually muddier than the pigs are. I've been doing some drain clear out. We're supposed to be getting a whole bunch of rain here in the next 24 hours. Severe flooding possibly, so I've been trying to get all my ditch lines cleaned out, silk catches, all that type of stuff. So I'm covered in mud. So I thought, while I'm muddy, let's get in and talk muddy pigs. Hot fins. So you can see here's our 8 growers that we've raised out this winter. Again, not a big fan of raising pigs on our woodlot pasture in the wintertime. It's just really hard on the ground. But they're doing pretty well. They've got 2 months before processing. So not going to finish as big as I'm used to with my Duroc line, but I still think they're going to finish okay. For those of you that have watched for a while, you know that we had the blonde pigs there and had the stripes, and he's pretty much lost all of his stripes. You can just see a little bit of his orange stripe there, but he's become stripeless. And then even our brown one, we had one that was, I can't even tell which one it is now, but we had one that was brown. That's actually it back there. So, of course, everything, I guess, looks brown right now in all the mud. But I gave them this pasture a couple months ago so they could, once they were weaned, they could have access to it. And it's this whole woodlot here. So it goes all the way up to the last bench to the top of the ridge. So it's probably about 2 acres. And they've been enjoying it with forage. There's a little bit of grass that grows up in our staging area, but just been a lot of forage, a lot of mast since they've been off of it all fall. Nobody's been on it actually, oh wow, nobody's been on it since last processing, so that'd been last July. So they've had access to that, still finding a lot of good forage there. So the plan is to process all 8 of these, and what we'll do is we've got 2 that will stay here in our freezers. So for our own personal consumption, we go through about 2 pigs a year, and we'll have 2 that are going to a friend on the other side of the state who is exchanging for beef, because we don't obviously raise beef here. So we're going to swap for one of his grass-fed beef, and then we have 4 that are going to go up for sale for either wholes and halves or individual cuts. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to shake out yet. With only 4, I've got a lot of customers that are going to be wanting wholes and halves, so we may just let them all go for wholes and halves and not have cuts this year. We'll just see how it goes. Well, I'm going to run up real quick and feed the boars, and we'll check on them, and we'll do an update on the 2 boars that are still around and have not been put in the game. They're still in the dugout, if you know what I mean. So we'll talk about them and show you what we got going on there. Boys. So as you can see, the 2 have put on weight pretty well, decent sized boars. I've been trying to keep the ration low. Not starve them, of course, but keep it low enough that they don't become huge. And I've been watching them compared to the sows, and they're actually staying about the same. So trying to keep that weight even. Definitely, unnamed boar here is definitely larger than Napoleon. We still want to put Napoleon in freezer camp, but we haven't yet. And I'm going to get into that here in a second as to why he's still standing. So the boar corral and the cover are still working. The bridge is still intact so far. Hopefully this big flood that we're supposed to get won't knock it out. But all of that's doing well. This pasture is obviously been hit hard because first time in, overwintered here. We just don't have any flat ground to overwinter them on. If I had a large, even if I had a large barn, I'd look at doing that. But still playing around with some of that winter infrastructure since we've had boars. We usually don't have that issue because we don't normally have boars. But what I've saved is a secondary pasture. You can see here, this is another paddock that I can get into by just swinging that green gate. So I can swing that gate one way when they're in the corral, and then now they have access to that pasture, or they can stay here. So probably in March, so in a couple weeks, we'll be moving them over to that pasture. I'm not sure. I've seeded some of that, so we're going to see how that comes back from seeding, from fall seeding. So we may have to wait for that to come up a little bit before we move them over. Both areas are woodlot, so they're not, don't have a ton of sunlight coming through, so they're not going to produce a ton of pasture grass. Obviously trying to keep erosion to a minimum. So you saw when we were driving up here to the boar pasture how the road, the new road that we put in on top of our corduroy road, improved all that, improved drainage. All of that is actually working quite well. Right now it's just a simple fact that I don't have any gravel for the top of that. And that's going to be a huge investment we're going to make this spring, hopefully, when things hopefully dry out a little bit, to get in here to actually transport gravel back. So this winter we had just a ton of freeze and thaw. And I think the longest freezing snap we had was maybe 5 days. So it would freeze at night, it would thaw, it would freeze, it would thaw. So it just became bottomless in places. But check this out, this is something interesting. So right here at the boar corral is this hole of water. And then when we had the excavator in this summer, we cut this ditch line to tie all this in. But this is solid stone here at my feet. So just about 8 inches below the mud is solid sandstone, and that comes from this pretty good outcrop right here of ground. So there's sandstone base underneath here. But where there's clearly not a base of sandstone, or I guess where a lot of the soil, the clay, comes in contact with the bedrock of the sandstone, we get these springs. And you can see a good bit of water's coming down the ditch line here. So that's just standard drainage coming out of the valley. But look right here. So there's a bunch of water coming out of that hole. That's a bottomless. I'm sinking into my ankles. Try that again. And you can see the water just percolating up like a fountain right there. Just amazes me how much water comes out. And that runs all year long. It doesn't run that much in the summertime, but it's constantly running. So I made this small collection area with the excavator this summer for the reason of catching water. So that's actually, it doesn't look very formidable, but that's actually a couple feet deep. And what's neat is this winter, even when we had 2 degrees Fahrenheit, that never froze. It had just a tiny little layer of ice at the dead center, but because all that water's coming out of the mountain there at 55 degrees or whatever, it never froze. So this is hopefully going to be a reservoir of water that I can draw in case our main stream ever dries up. Then I have this spring access right here. The 2 boys have done well with their cover, staying pretty dry. Unlike the others, they didn't eat all their straw. The other sows just ate every bit of it, but we'll go to that next. So as you can see, it's a little muddy up here with our circumstance. Really ready for drier weather. I was going to talk a little bit about the sows, but I think we need to feed the feeders here because we're not going to be able to hear over all their squealing. So let me get them taken care of first. Who says raising pigs isn't glamorous? So a couple videos ago made this tire feeder, and it's doing well in the sense that it is staying put. They haven't flipped it over the hill. The main reason is when I set it down, it sunk into a bunch of mud, froze for about 5 days, and then of course thawed back out. So it has probably more weight of mud in it than it would if I filled them full of concrete. So it hasn't gone anywhere. I was concerned about the height, the fact that they were going to have to kind of stand on their tiptoes to eat, and realizing that obviously they're just going to put their feet up on the platform. And I guess it's good to some degree because it's giving them a chance to get their feet out of the mud. Obviously they've got all this pasture behind them that they can go through to get away from the mud. But for some reason, man, right now, they just love hanging out right here. They'll be here most of the day. Occasionally they'll walk out on the pasture, but they just like hanging out here. And they've just churned this. So we're definitely going to have to come this spring. We're going to fence area off here and actually use some sawmill boards to create some terrace barriers. Something that can, it's no big deal if it rots out, but just something to slow down, mitigate some erosion here, reseed this real heavy, and of course get the pigs off of it. We've got the north pasture that we'll move everybody to probably here in the next month or so. So with the fact that we've got one boar, where is he? Yeah, the fuzzy one. One boar, and of course our 3 sows, 2 that have only had 1 litter prior to, and then Merida, who's been on the farm for a while. We were curious to see how this boar would do, and we feel pretty confident that he did his job, but there is something that's shown up that I've not experienced before, and so I had to consult some other people that have some more experience with boars to give me a clear picture of what's going on here. So let me describe what we had. So we've had pigs for going on 7 years now, but this is the first year that I've ever had a boar. So of course we know the difference between AI and a boar as far as hands off, hands on. So was concerned, okay, is Mongo, he's young, does he know what to do? And we feel pretty confident that he did. We saw all the sign of him interacting with their heat cycles. I've left him in here. There's actually been, calendar-wise, there should have been 3 heat cycles that have passed, so that's why he's still in here, just to make sure. But what I've noticed is I feel pretty confident they've settled, but when it comes time around their heat cycle, there's just the slightest bit of sign, a little bit of swelling, but mostly it's just him being a little bit more rambunctious. So I wasn't sure. I was like, is there a false heat? Is there a chance they didn't settle? Does Mongo not really know how to pitch? Do I have a defective boar here type of thing? But I talked to David Crafton, where I got the black pigs from, and he explained it to me this way, that Mongo's just being a teenager and he's going to try to engage as much as he can engage. But I noticed anytime he would try to mount them, that they would not have anything to do with that. Now he was chasing Merida around just the other day, and Merida is much taller than the others because she's an older pig. So I thought maybe there's a chance that he was too short and he couldn't get the job done. But I've yet to see a standing heat in her either. She's just had a little bit of swelling from time to time, but no standing heat. So she may have settled as well, which would be very interesting because we haven't bred her in a while. So in a video we did, I think early January, we chipped up a bunch of limbs and things to put all wood chips down here to try to mitigate the mud. And it worked quite well for about a month, but the fact that we've had all the freeze and thaw, and of course the fact that we feed here, so they just keep, any little morsel of food that's falling out of their bowl, they just keep coming in and churning and turning this stuff. So I've got, you can see where my side-by-side's parked, I've got some little element of wood chips. So this is one spot I don't sink up to my, halfway in my boots here. So there's a little bit of wood chips still hanging around, but most have been turned under here. So that's why it's a little muddy. Again, before next winter, going to look heavily at what we can do for a sacrificial area to keep our breed stock flat ground, heavy wood chips, something that doesn't create a lot of erosion. It's just, I don't have a lot of options here with flat ground. So that's on my to-do list to figure that out. Merida's got her belly full, so she's taking a nap now. So one thing that's been interesting is utilizing the farrowing barn here with our two dividers. So one side is where the sows come in, and the other side is where the growers come in. So they both have access to the barn for shelter this winter as it got cold and funky. But what's blown my mind is, I guess since I weaned the piglets in here, so they had to go to the bathroom in here for that week while they were being weaned, or around the small weaning paddock that I had. It wasn't that large. They've just now declared this as the bathroom. So they literally sleep in this tiny little corner over here, and they've made this the bathroom. So we got to get here and muck this out. The pro is, of course, I've got a lot of manure for the compost pile. The con is I've got to get in and muck out when I have pastured pigs. I was hoping I wouldn't have to muck out barns, but such is life. You sleeping, Meredith? The two sows are showing a little bit of side belly that leads me to believe they've settled as well. They're not nearly as slender as they were, so they're starting to show a little bit of pooch. So I think they've settled, which puts them at a farrowing date, the 1st of May, I believe, if they settle on that first cycle. A little bit later in the spring than I like, but is what it is. All right, well, I hope that answers the questions you guys had and gave you some insight as to what we've got going on right now with the pigs. Just really ready for the cold snap to stop and the precipitation to stop so we can actually get some things growing here. Once we get things reseeded, then I think we're going to be able to kind of get in front of this instead of chasing our tails when it comes to rotating the pigs. All right, well, take care, everybody.